your lovely faces. That's lovely. Thank you. Great. Okay, well, slight apologies for having this picture as the screensaver when you come back from lunch. Don't know that that's the most appealing thing to to have in front of you, but we're going to talk about something related to our stomachs and gastrointestinal system. So hence the picture of somebody grabbing their stomach like this. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Sam Adamstern. I'm a GP. I've been a GP for quite a long time in the UK, and I did some talks, some interesting, fun talks at Chabad when I was in South Africa at the beginning of the year. So my wife is South African. So I'm currently in London, and we're caught in not having a summer at the moment, which sometimes happens in the UK. We've been caught whilst the rest of Europe is basking in super hot temperatures. London is caught in a weather system of rain that's been going on for the last 3 weeks. Anyway, that's a little bit of the weather. So I wanted to talk about this subject, irritable bowel syndrome. So I don't know about you, but when I think about the topic irritable bowel syndrome, it doesn't sound like necessarily the most sexy topic that you can talk about. However, there are some really interesting things that are happening in relation to some of the understanding about it, some of the diagnostics and some of the treatments. So I thought it would be just an interesting area to talk about. So I'm going to do the presentation. Can you see the slides, the presentation clearly so far? Can you see the screensaver? Can everybody see that?
Yep, we see the screen. We're just muting it so we won't distract you.
Okay. And so I'm going to do the presentation will be something like 15 to 20 minutes. Then after that, we'll have an opportunity for some questions. We'll welcome your questions. All right, so I'm going to, okay, so the title is IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, more than meets the eye. Okay, so irritable bowel syndrome, as it says on the slide, it's a common disorder. So, and as the next slide is going to show, it affects maybe 10 to 20% of the adult population. It's hugely common, and it presents with very common symptoms that we see related to the stomach, abdominal pain, bloating, gassiness, cramping, diarrhea, and/or constipation. So those are extremely common symptoms, and as I say, it affects as much as 10 to 20% of the adult population, usually starting in adult life. Well, so that 10 to 20% is quoted in the United States, but I think it's going to be a similarly high figure, at least in developed countries. It's going to be a high figure. And importantly, it's a diagnosis of exclusion. So that means that other significant organic diagnoses need to be excluded before you have the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. So particularly, we're thinking of things like bowel cancer. So it's also very common. Inflammatory bowel disease, which is the two main components of inflammatory bowel disease are Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, and peptic ulcer disease, which is gastric ulcers, duodenal ulcers. Those are common, what we call differentials, so common things that need to be excluded. Okay. All right. So I think it's that's why I wanted to talk about it, is that latest or recent research suggests that it may represent a number of different diseases that are presenting with the same symptoms. So that's never really the way that it was thought about before. And it was often considered something that was in quite a few places was very difficult to manage and treat. And the fact that it may represent a number of different diseases explains a number of very different ways to approach treating it. And interestingly, with irritable bowel syndrome, the presentation is very different between different people in terms of the severity of symptoms and also how long the symptoms can last. So in some people, you can get symptoms that are not very severe and last a few months and then go away. And in other people, it's really intrusive symptoms that people get that can go on for months, years. So a very varied presentation. And nowadays it's considered, so we're looking at this term called a functional disorder, as in a glitch in the nervous system, in the regulation of the normal functioning of the lower digestive tract. So if you have a look with like a scope at the bowel and the lining of the bowel, it looks fine. It doesn't look as if there's anything that's abnormal, unlike those other conditions that needed to be excluded. And a functional disorder is something that interferes with the body's normal activities by influencing the sensitivity of the system. So we're talking about the sensitivity of the system in relation to the nervous system regulation, or by impairing the way that the brain controls and regulates the system. And I think it's fair to say that there's increasing awareness of functional disorders in medicine. So I think that really ties in with the title of this talk, that IBS, there's more than meets the eye. It's, yeah, just more is being revealed about it. Okay, so the classical treatments for IBS include, so if there are foods that are triggering symptoms, then to avoid those foods. I don't know if anybody has heard of it, but the typical initial kind of classical diet that often does help IBS symptoms is called the low FODMAP diet, so FODMAP diet. And that is typically suggested by gastroenterologists, new dietitians, and that includes, so I've got it written here, it says eggs and meat, grains, for example, rice, quinoa, oats, veg, for example, eggplant, potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, and zucchini, fruit, grapes, oranges, strawberries, blueberries, pineapples, and cheeses, some cheeses, camembert, cheddar, and feta cheese. The thing with the low FODMAP diet is that it often relieves or improves symptoms a lot within the first couple of months, but it's not a sustainable diet for many months. You need to start replacing food. So diet was a classical treatment. So antispasmodic medication. So what antispasmodic medications do, for example, peppermint oil is one of them. They slow down the transit in the bowel, and they can help symptoms. So that's another classical medication. So that helps some people. And then some people have IBS where they have constipation, and then fiber in the diet can help that. And if it's diarrhea predominant, then antidiarrheals can help that. So those are the kind of classical common treatments that have been used for a long time. Okay, so then I wanted to go into some other areas that you may or may not have heard about. So I wanted to put some focus on the gut microbiome. So this really is an area of increasing exploration, discoveries, research in the last few years. I think it's fair to say that. And the gut microbiome, we didn't really used to know very much about this. It wasn't much talked about, but it consists of the microorganisms, so that's bacteria and other organisms which inhabit the gut. And there are more than 100 trillion organisms. Okay, so that is a lot of organisms. So that is what's a trillion is a million. So 100 million organisms. If you think of that, that's phenomenal number of organisms. So, and the findings of the bacteria are critical for normal. So this slide's a little bit busy, but I'm going to talk to it. Bacteria are critical for normal gut development and health. And the theory or the hypothesis is that if there's an imbalance in some of the bacteria, which they call dysbiosis, then it can lead to activation of the gut immune system and potential low-grade inflammation, and that can lead to IBS in some people. So there've been a subset of people with IBS has been shown to come on after they have had gastroenteritis. So previously they didn't have IBS, and then they developed IBS. And so it's thought that the mechanism is a disruption in the microbiome. So those organisms that are living in the gut. And yeah, in addition, multiple studies have demonstrated differences in the composition of the microbiome with patients with IBS. So that is, I think, completely fascinating. And I think that's part of the pioneering work that's going on in terms of managing this condition and many other and several other conditions. So then we come on to, so you may well have heard of prebiotics and probiotics. So these are substances, so long words for prebiotics, oligosaccharides. We're not going to go into that in too much detail. But what they do is they promote the growth of bacteria, of healthy bacteria. And several studies have shown an improvement in symptoms with people with IBS who have taken prebiotics, and that includes whole grains, greens, onions, and garlic. Okay, so that's prebiotics. And probiotics are actually the right. So prebiotics stimulate the microorganisms, the bacteria and other organisms, to grow healthy communities, what they call of those organisms. Probiotics are actually organisms that you can that you introduce into the gut, and they help the microbial communities, so the microorganisms, grow in a healthy way. And also probiotics have been shown to help IBS symptoms, and they include, you may have heard, yogurt, kombucha, and sauerkraut. So that is an interesting area of management and exploration around IBS. Okay, so the other area that I wanted to focus on that is also kind of new, and I think really fascinating is that IBS. So it's been known for a long time that stress can bring on IBS. Psychological situations, emotional situations can bring on IBS, and people with IBS may have some stress, anxiety, other psychological things going on. And recent studies show that there are similar abnormalities in changes in those those microorganisms in the gut between people with IBS and depression. So I think that that's very interesting and very, fascinating. I think that probiotics in some people have been shown to improve psychological symptoms in otherwise healthy individuals. So there are no known gut pathology, no known gut symptoms. You just give the probiotics and it's helping the the mood of the improving depression in those people. Okay, so the other area that I want to highlight, so we've highlighted the microbiome. The other area, which I think is a new area, definitely an area of growth in understanding and in our management, really, is the enteric nervous system. So, okay, so it is the nervous, one of the main divisions of the autonomic, so automatic nervous system, and those neurons govern the function of the gastrointestinal tract. Okay, and there is a big communication network between our gut and our brain. That's really the major point I wanted to get at. So, okay. So researchers are finding evidence that irritation in the gastrointestinal system may send signals to the brain to trigger mood changes. Okay, so in the gut, so you may have heard of serotonin in the brain. It's one of the hormones that has us feeling good and optimistic and happy and gives us pleasure. Well, 90% of the body's serotonin is actually made in the gut. So that is just evidence of the degree of connection of that nervous system between the gut and the brain. And so these findings may well explain, it's always been known that there's a higher than high incidence of depression and anxiety with people with IBS. And it may well be through that gut-brain pathway. And then, so, you know, I went to a talk from gastroenterologists on IBS about 10 years ago. And just at the end of all the therapies or the possibilities for treatment, just in really small, it was mentioned CBT. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
We can hear you, but the plug flat, we're putting it right back in. Just a moment.
Okay. So if you'd like me to repeat any of that, I'm happy to do that. I can go back shall I go back 1 or 2 slides?
I think we caught it all. The plug just fell out, so we're just getting.
Okay, I saw a nodding. I saw somebody nodding to your left, Rabbi. What would you like? You want me to go back? What's the consensus? I'll do what the consensus is.
Yeah, go for it. Do it.
Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go.
No, we're all keen to hear.
Okay. So did you? Okay. So we're really talking about the enteric nervous system, the connection via the nervous system in the gut and the brain, and that degree of connection, and the fact that serotonin, the feel-good hormone in the brain, 90% of it is made in the gut, and that likely is at least part of the explanation why a higher than normal percentage of people with IBS have depression and anxiety, because of that gut-brain connection. And I went, so the gastroenterologists were in the treatment modalities about 10 years ago, would talk, just at the end, there'd be one line of CBT can help some patients. But the fact that this gut-brain connection has been demonstrated in that way, and that degree of connection between the gut and the brain, then makes a lot more sense about why inputs related, focused on your psychology and your emotions, are going to help your gut. And so things like talking therapy inputs, so cognitive behavioral therapy particularly, but other talking therapy inputs can certainly help your gut symptoms. And then we've talked about the autonomic nervous system, which is the automatic nervous system, which comprises the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic nervous system is fight and flight. That's right, fight, flight. And parasympathetic nervous system is rest and relax. And so therapies aimed at enhancing the parasympathetic nervous system can help the IBS symptoms. So those are things like hypnotherapy. That's part of the way that hypnotherapy works. And then there are breathing exercises. So various types of breathing exercises which enhance your parasympathetic nervous system. And then there are things like mindfulness and then meditation. All of those things connect in that way and can help your IBS symptoms. And then also medications. So for example, antidepressant medications, there's a class of them that enhance the serotonin in the brain. They, in some cases, can calm symptoms by actually acting on the nerve cells in the gut rather than directly on the brain, in the brain. So those are the bits. So it's a kind of quick run through of a few areas, few themes related to IBS. Those are the bits that I wanted to highlight. And the next bit is, so that's it. That's the presentation. And your questions, your thoughts are welcomed. Did everybody hear that?
We were now go ahead. Say it again.
Do antidepressant meds help?
I heard a little bit of that question. Could you maybe
Question
say it
is-
louder? Or
Sure. The question is, do antidepressant medicines help IBS?
I think they can. So I think that through this information and the understanding that we have, yeah, IBS antidepressant medications can help IBS. So I don't think it's going to be 100%. It's not going to be in all people. It's not a definite that's going to happen, but it's certainly they certainly can.
Yeah, go ahead.
What foods one avoid? Particularly, you did mention certain foods.
What foods should one avoid? You mentioned some. Do you want to repeat and maybe elaborate?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here we are. I've got it. Trigger foods. Okay. So it's what you can imagine. Okay. So if you were going to compile a list of foods to avoid, it's probably going to be that. Okay. So what I've got, I look this up. So so your typical processed foods, sweet foods, cookies, chips, refined grains, so that's white flour, fizzy drinks,
All the good stuff.
all the good stuff, isn't it? So and it doesn't mean, okay, so I think all of this needs to be taken in context, really. So we once had a patient who had a high cholesterol and was advised at that time, he went on medication, was advised not to eat any cake at that time, but then 20 years later he still hadn't had any cake at all, and that's a sad thing, I think. So it all needs to be done in balance, but that is those are the good stuff, those, yeah. So everything in balance, everything in moderation, but those are the kinds of foods that would typically trigger. I think also very rich foods, rich sauces, that kind of thing, spicy foods, all of that stuff that can, you'd think, and then caffeine, alcohol, but it doesn't mean to say that you're forever banned. But those can be the triggers, yeah.
So everything in moderation, including moderation.
Exactly. That's that. Yeah, I think so, because there's also a thing about, anyway, it's not to justify just completely, eating just a diet of that. But sometimes, if you're, yeah, everything in moderation is fine.
Thank you.
Could
Any
you?
other questions? We heard you mention, you spoke about gout. What's the correlation of IBT to gout?
I
IBS.
didn't mention gout. I don't remember mentioning gout. I don't think I
Okay,
mentioned.
maybe you said
What's
gut. Maybe you said
gut?
gut.
I said gut, but in a UK accent. Sorry, an English accent. Okay, so
But
gout.
is there any correlation to gout?
Yes. So there will be a correlation to gout. In that, I'm just thinking gout is triggered by can be triggered by certain foods. For example, alcohol can trigger gout, and then that can trigger IBS symptoms. So I think that the foods, what can trigger gout? I think it's is it meat? I think some types of meat can do it. I think wine can do it. And those are going to rather heavier on your stomach. And then they could possibly trigger the IBS symptoms. I don't think that there's an obviously gout is not one of the conditions which you necessarily associate with kind of psychological things like anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. So I don't think there's that kind of link. But I think through the foods there could be a link with gout, definitely.
Interesting. If any of these Zoom participants want to ask a question on Facebook and YouTube, you can't ask questions, but you can WhatsApp them to me. But if you are on Zoom, then you can unmute yourself and you could ask any questions to Dr. Stern.
Please, yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, if you could show and if you're able to show your video, that would be great to also see you. But
yeah. Well, for asking about gout already, let's go back to blood pressure, since you gave a talk about that a while ago. And the question is, if one is suffering or enduring high blood pressure, any particular medications they can take, or foods, any foods that trigger it, instead of having the medication, are there foods that cause it or foods that help it?
yeah, blood pressure. Yeah, so we that was something that we touched on. There are so one thing with blood pressure. So I wouldn't necessarily make the decision yourself to come off medication unless it's discussed with your your clinician, because you don't want to give yourself peaks of blood pressure and make that okay when it's not. So that needs to be all discussed. But then so salt has definitely got a connection to high blood pressure. So that's a definite correlation with salt. I think that's the main one. Now the main connection with high blood pressure is in salty foods. So the other ones are not coming to me right off the top of my head, but I think so salt is definitely a big connection with high blood pressure. Does that answer your question enough?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions anyone has? No question? Lisa? With the high blood pressure, yeah. Have you got any questions? Lisa, any questions? Anyone? Army food. What's army food? Enlighten us. Avoid it, you said. Yeah, what did they serve? Okay. Anyone else have questions? Any of our Zoom participants have questions?
Feel free, whatever the questions.
Miriam's got a question. Did you hear? Is IBS a lifetime sentence or can it be cured?
Well, it's not a lifetime sentence because it can be very variable in its how long people suffer from it. And so some people get through it quickly. Other people, if they've had it for a long time, so I mean, typically, so hopefully the symptoms should get a lot better and manageable. Whether it's cured and actually goes away, not sure that would happen. But the aim would definitely for the symptoms would be for the symptoms to be manageable, so that you could live a very tolerable life with it.
It's related to any hormonal changes.
Is it related to any hormonal changes?
So I think that we do see some women who are in their reproductive years who tend to get more IBS, more gut symptoms, cyclically related to their periods, just before, just after their periods. So I think that there can be an element of hormonal association. And it can mimic other things. I mean, yeah, it can mimic those other. So it's as we said, it's a diagnosis of exclusion in the gastrointestinal system, but it can also mimic some gynae symptoms, like so endometriosis, because for example, because you can get the symptoms quite low down in your gut. They can sometimes present quite similarly. So that's another kind of differential, another thing to exclude.
Is there a difference between IBD and IBS? Is the
yeah. So So that's a clear clear diagnostic difference. So IBD is inflammatory bowel disease. So that's what we mentioned as one of the main differentials. So that's Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And in IBD, when you have a look in the bowel, if you have a look with the scope, you see inflammation in the lining of the gut. And then if they take a biopsy, you can see the inflammation all the way through. So that's a different thing. And IBD needs to be treated with anti-inflammatory medication. So that's steroids and other anti-inflammatory medication.
IBD. Yeah. The next question is, I once heard that IBD is common amongst the Jews. Is it necessarily more so common amongst Jews, and is that same applied to IBS?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I'm going to mark that. So that I think is probably true. And can I get back to you on that one?
Sure, it's just a matter of curiosity.
Yeah, I think it. I'll get back to you on that one. And the other one was IBS. Yeah.
Would it have to do with a typical Jewish diet?
Interesting. So I'm not sure if that can trigger the IBD changes. Maybe I'll get back on that one.
Are we generally more prone to stomach problems? I don't know. Just curious.
What? So when you say, what do you just say more about that? What do you mean generally more prone?
Are Jews genetically prone?
Are more prone to stomach problems. There are certainly some conditions that Jews are more prone to, but I don't think, for example, if you've got gastric cancer, so typically the people who were prone to that were like the Japanese, that kind of ethnic group, because of their diet. And they had these substances called nitrosamines in the fish that they were eating. So I think we've escaped that one.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
oh, challenge.
what about?
What is there a connection to blood clots in IBS?
Blood clots. So do you mean blood clots like DVT and the deep vein thrombosis type of blood clots?
Yeah.
Not that I know of. It's not one of the obvious associations. It's not one of the things that people go looking for, obviously. So IBS is as we said, is a functional disorder. So it's this disorder of the messaging between the nervous system and the response of the gut. So it shouldn't really be associated with increased kind of clotting tendency. So not that I know of, unless somebody's read something different, but it's not really one of the things that we go searching for.
Is there a correlation between IBS and hemorrhoids?
Yeah, there can be. So if you think that IBS can be can give you so some people get constipation with it, and if you get constipation then you strain, and then you get hemorrhoids as a mechanical effect of straining.
Okay, any other questions, ladies and gents? I think you've very thoroughly covered this topic, and we're very grateful to you, Dr. Stern. We're glad that the load shedding didn't interfere today.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. We look forward to your next exciting topic. And we'll
Great. No, I'll think about it. Yeah, no. So I want to think about things that are interesting and really get you thinking, get us thinking. I think this was an interesting one.
Another question coming up.
IBS can exist in children as much as adults. It's not just limited to adults. My grandchildren seem to suffer from IBS, so it's something that occurs in children as well as adults.
Oh.
How common is this for children? She's asking about children experiencing IBS as well.
Well, I'm sure that children can experience it. So that in the the information that I presented, it said that it typically comes on in adults, but there wouldn't be a reason why it couldn't come on in children. Why children couldn't have it also?
Is it allergy related?
Not in the information that the basic information that I was reading up about it, or that we know, but you would think it wouldn't be beyond the realms of reason that some kind of allergic thing could possibly set it up. Although it is a functional disorder, so you wouldn't see kind of allergic changes on the lining. So the answer is I'm not sure. And I'll look into it and I'll let you know.
Thank you, Doctor. We're looking forward to your next talk, please God. And
okay.
Maybe would arthritis and gout be of an interest to that's something I think that might be of interest.
Would you like that?
Yeah, I think so.
Arthritis and gout. Okay.
Yeah. When are you gonna be in town?
In September. I think so. I think we said maybe that Monday, the 11th of September.
Take a look. Monday,
would that be possible?
Yeah, it's close to Rosh Hashanah, but let's see then. Let me just see. Monday the 11th. It's the week before. It's Erev Rosh Hashanah, so it might be a busy time. But let's take a look. Are you here the week before as well?
No, I won't be. Not on the. No, I won't be the week. So it's just a short.
We're gonna schedule it in right now. Okay.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so we're gonna do arthritis and gout then.
Oh, before. Okay, just a moment. No, we're not doing it next week. Don't worry. Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. We'll be in touch.
Nice
the
to
best.
see you all. Thanks.